Hey everyone, welcome to today's Oracle Visual Builder Office Hour. And today we're going to do a crash course on Oracle Visual Builder. And we're going to talk about the building blocks that make up Visual Builder applications. Usually this session is much more deep and cover new features and new capabilities, but we thought it would make a good sense to dedicate at least one of those meetings to an introduction to what is Visual Builder and to explaining a little bit beyond just what the tool does, how it actually works, and look at what's going on beyond the wizards. My name is Shai Schmelzer. I'm part of the Oracle product management team for Oracle Visual Builder, and with me also today are Laura and Brian, who will be monitoring the Q&A panel. So while we're doing this session, you would see at the top there's a Q&A button, and you can click on it and you can ask questions, and feel free to ask questions during the session at any point of time. Laura and Brian would be able to answer those questions as we go along. And hopefully by the end of this session, our goal is for you to feel comfortable opening up Visual Builder, starting to develop with it, and also understanding what's going on and what are you actually doing, and be able to look and understand how development is done in Visual Builder. Right? But to start with, we're going to talk about what is Visual Builder. So Visual Builder is a platform for developing as well as hosting of both web and mobile applications. So we are able to develop the application through Visual Builder, but we're also hosting the application inside Visual Builder. It's a managed service, so you don't have to do anything. The minute that you spin up the service, everything is taken care of for you. All the aspects of the web server, the database behind it, the security, all of those things are already set up for you. You just need to develop your application, publish them, and let people access them. We are able to develop two types of application. Web applications are accessed from your browser, both on the desktop or on a mobile device, as well as progressive web apps and hybrid apps, which are two ways to package an application that will be installed on your mobile device, be accessed through an icon on your mobile device, be able to interact with device features like the camera and files on the device, and even be able to work offline if you needed to. Okay. The way that you build application with Visual Builder, you're going to use the technology stack that is consisting of HTML5 and JavaScript for creating the UI with CSS to control the look and feel. And you're going to talk to the backend using REST services. Okay, so this is the modern cloud technology architecture. And the backend can be anything that you want. In terms of building the front end, we're going to use the Oracle Jet UI component to construct your user interface. Jet stands for Java Extension Toolkit, and Oracle Jet is a toolkit that provides you with over 100 UI components that you can use to construct very rich user interfaces. We're using Oracle Jet inside Oracle to build our modern cloud-based applications, and Oracle Jet is also an open source toolkit, so you can use it to build any type of application that you want that runs in a browser. Or again, on a mobile device. The nice thing about Oracle Jet, beyond its being free, it's very easy to use and learn, and using Visual Builder makes it even simpler to get started with Oracle Jet and build your user interface with minimal amount of coding. Beyond building the user interface, Visual Builder is also able to build business objects, basically components that store data and have some business logic on this data. These pieces of data are stored as tables in an Oracle database for you. And then they are exposed as a bunch of REST services that allow you to do all the CRUD operation on those pieces of information. We also do things like query by example, relationship management, being able to sort, pagination. All of those things are provided for you out of the box with those REST APIs. And in addition, you can add your own business logic to those business objects, do things like validation checks, do specific methods and function on those business objects. Beyond the business object that you create inside Visual Builder, you're also able to access any external piece of information or data source, as long as it exposes a REST-based user interface. So we basically make it very easy to consume REST services from anywhere and bring them and interact with them from inside your Visual Builder application, mesh data from multiple places, and create very rich UIs on top of them. Two of the places where you can very easily get data from in Visual Builder are the Oracle Cloud Apps, the Oracle SaaS applications, as well as all the integrations that you are exposing from Oracle Integration, which is a layer that does integration across multiple backends. And both of those offer built-in service catalogs inside Visual Builder that makes it very easy to pick, for example, an object that is exposed in Oracle Cloud Apps and bring it into your user interface. One last point to make about Visual Builder. Visual Builder is the development tool being used to build our new generation of Oracle Cloud applications. Our new modules inside the Oracle SaaS offering are being built with Visual Builder, and we already have multiple modules that have been released as part of Oracle Cloud applications that have been developed with Visual Builder. And the nice thing is the same tool that we're using to build our applications is, of course, available for you to build your own applications. The main focus of Visual Builder, the main benefit that it gives you is that it provides a very productive way to build an application by focusing on a visual approach to application development. Okay? So rather than you having to code everything, we're focusing more on capabilities such as dragging and dropping to lay out your page in a visual way, defining your business logic through diagrams where you can basically indicate the flow of your logic, very easy and declarative way to access REST services, to create business objects. A lot of those things are made a lot simpler by giving you a visual approach to do those. One thing to remember though is that whenever you're doing something visual, there's always code behind it, and you can always access the code in Visual Builder, and you can modify the code directly as well. So Visual Builder basically gives you two ways to work with your application, either directly in code or visually, or mix them both together. And this is one of the goals of today's seminar, is to go beyond just the drag and drop capabilities and show you the code and explain to you how the code works so you would feel comfortable working in both ways. It's very likely that you'll end up working in the visual way because it's more productive, but in some cases it makes sense to understand what's going on in the code layer as well. So, top 5 things to remember about Visual Builder. First of all, it's a cloud native tool. This is not a tool that Oracle had before and we moved it to the cloud. This is a tool or a platform that was developed from the ground up just for the cloud. It's only available as a cloud offering. It uses cloud native architecture, cloud native capabilities, and all the interaction that you're going to have with Visual Builder is done from the browser. So the development is from the browser, the publishing is from the browser, and of course, accessing the end application is done from a browser. The focus of the tool is on ease of use. You're going to see you can construct an application in 10 minutes and have it fully functional. However, we're going to talk about going beyond those 10 minutes and understanding how to do more complex things. Visual Builder is also a very powerful tool for team development. It's not just a tool for a single developer, it's a tool that allows you to do team development and collaborative development. We actually integrate it completely with Git for version management. We can integrate with continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. And in fact, there's also something called Visual Builder Studio that actually provides you with a full team development platform for Visual Builder. And we're going to talk about it at the end of today. As I mentioned, it's very well integrated with the Oracle SaaS offering, with the Oracle Cloud application, allowing you to access their data through a service catalog. It supports single sign-on with them, so you can easily embed a Visual Builder page inside Oracle SaaS. And it supports the same look and feel as Oracle SaaS, which is the Redwood look and feel. In fact, you're going to be able to modify Oracle SaaS pages that have been developed with Visual Builder, also with Visual Builder, to do configuration on top of them if you want to. And the last point to make here, Visual Builder is an extensible platform. We're going to give you a lot of functionality out of the box that you can use, but beyond that, you can also extend it by bringing in external JavaScript library and external HTML component, your own CSS, and of course, connect to any data source using REST. So those are the top 5 things to know about Visual Builder overall. And now let's get off the slides and switch over to a demo to show you how you actually build your first application with Visual Builder. When you go into Visual Builder the first time, you're going to get a nice screen with two options there to import or create a new application. I'm going to create a new application, and we're going to create the Crash Course application. You can choose a template for your application. By the way, you can develop your own templates for an application, your own look and feels, and you can share them with your team. I'm going to use what we call an empty application. So I'm not going to create anything ahead of time. I'm going to start from scratch. When you get into Visual Builder, you're going to be prompted with the welcome page. And on the welcome page, you can see what you can do. You can connect to data coming from REST services or from your own business object. You can create mobile applications. Those are applications that install on your mobile device, Android or iOS, and run over there. You can create web application accessible from your browser. You can bring in external UI components from our component catalog or from your own component catalog. And you can also integrate with processes running in the Oracle Process Cloud. We're going to start by building a web application. So we're going to click web application and then click to create a new one. We have two simple templates over here, one with just one page and another one with a navigation system. So we're going to create a little HR application based on the navigation system. We're going to get a page for employees, a page for departments, and let's have one other page. You can add more pages, remove pages, and basically build your own little menu up there at the top. Once you click create, you're going to be taken into the visual editor. So this is the environment where you're actually going to develop your application. Okay. And what you can see in the middle is your page. Okay, this is the page that you're going to build now. You can see the navigation at the top. We're right now on the emp page, and you have an empty area, and you start by dragging and dropping components over here. On the left side, you have all the components from Oracle Jet that you can bring in, just drag and drop over here. As you can see, it's a very rich set of components, everything from a simple button to complex Gantt charts and tag clouds and all sorts of other charts can be brought in into here. By the way, this is a very nice little environment. You can click and minimize areas to get more space to edit your page. Okay, and let's start by layouting our page. So among our components, we also have a section for layout components that we can bring into the page. And we're going to use a panel component, drop it over here, and then we can resize it. So we want to split our page into two areas, the left and the right side. It's very easy to do it like that. It would be nice to also have a header to our page. So let's look up the header component, bring it to the top, and change the title to employees, for example. Okay. And then on the left side, we want a table that would show us some data. So we'll put a table over here. Okay. And on the right side, let's put in some charts. So we can scroll down. Let's pick up the bar chart, for example, put it over here. Once you put something on the page, you can also modify it. So you can resize it. Okay. Each one of the components has a bunch of properties. You can go over and modify those properties. For example, switch the orientation of the chart, whether you want it horizontal or vertical, like that. Okay. Go to the table, for example, you can set it to be a grid table with the lines, or maybe you like it better without the lines. Okay. So that's the basic editing of the page layout. Now, for the table, we have a quick start that would allow you to add data to the table. In order to do that, you need to have some data source. So again, this can be any REST service, or it can be your own business object. So if you remember on the welcome page, one of the options here is to create business object. So let's click business object, and then we can create a business object directly here, give it a name, things like that. Or we can take some shortcuts. For example, if you already have data in Excel spreadsheets, you can use our data manager option here to import business object from spreadsheets, either Excel or CSV files. So I have a little spreadsheet over here with some data about employees. I'm going to pick it up. This would load the spreadsheet into the Oracle Cloud, into Visual Builder. Visual Builder then analyzes the spreadsheet and sees that there are 3 data sheets in there for employees, department, and location. it's going to suggest to create those tables for me. I can then see for each of those tables which fields are going to be created for me. I can modify their data type, for example, over here, and then I can click finish, which would then go over and create those tables, import the data from the spreadsheet into the tables. And now I have here 3 tables that I can access. So let's look at the employees table, for example. We can see the list of fields over here, and we can also see the data from the spreadsheet that is now inside this table. So from this point on, I'm not working on a spreadsheet anymore. I'm working on the table in the Oracle database. Now, one of the things I can do here is there's a bunch of fields that were created, but I can add more fields. For example, I can add a manager field, which would be a Boolean, which would indicate whether an employee is a manager or not. Okay. I can also add relationship between the tables. For example, in the employees table, I can create a department field, okay, which would link to the department table and to the department name. This way I can assign each employee to a specific department. Okay. I can also do fields that are doing aggregation and functions and calculation. For example, now I'm looking at the departments, okay, and I'm going to add a field to the department that would be the number of EMPs, okay, how many employees we have. This is going to be a numeric field, and I'm going to define it as an aggregation. So it's going to go over to the employees, and it's going to use a function. In our case, we want to count how many employees are in each department. Okay. So this is how you create a calculated field. So this is basically now our structure for the employee. You can see the department and manager fields are right now empty, but I can from here go and edit the data. Okay. And for example, I can say that this employee is working in the IT department. Okay. And he's a manager, for example. Okay. And I can update the data from here. But this is not the user interface that we want for the user. We want to build a new user interface. It's just, this is an easy way for you to go to the data and manipulate it. Now, in real time, all this data is exposed as a bunch of REST services that give you all the operation you need on this data. Update, insert, delete, and of course, querying of the data is available through those REST services. In addition, by the way, you can use business rules. You can define your own triggers on events. So for example, what's going to happen every time that I insert a record. You can add validations on aspects of the fields or the record, and you can do a lot of business logic over there. We'll keep that for another time, and we'll come back to our user interface that we've been building. All right, so this is the page that we've been building. Now that we have our business object over here, we can pick up our table, use the quick start, and add data to the table from the employees business object. Okay. I can see the list of fields over here, okay, and I can choose what to show here. For example, I want to show the picture of the employee, their name, whether they are a manager, for example, and maybe we'll also show their department. So again, I can drill in here into the related items. Okay, we'll switch the picture to actually show up as an image, so we can switch the component that is shown here, and then click finish. And now we're actually going over, fetching the information from the REST service and showing it to you in the table over here. Okay. Similarly, we can click on the chart here, click add data, same quick start, pick up the same source of data. This time we want to show the salary for each employee. Okay, over here, click next and finish, and we'll get a chart that shows us the salary for each one of those employees. All right, so this is how easy it is to build your first page. Now, in most cases, you don't just want to show data, you also want to be able to do things on the data, for example, modify it. So if I pick up my table over here and I click add and edit page, this would allow me to, again, use our quick start to connect to the same employees source of data and create a page that would allow me to edit the data. I can choose to edit all the fields. Maybe some of the fields are actually ones that I don't need to edit here. So I'm going to remove those over here. The ID, for example, is not interesting to me. And yeah, and the links is also not interesting. And then, of course, I can modify the order of things. I can move this to the top, for example. Again, I can change the type of control that is being used here for components. For example, the email, I would want to show it an email field, which would do a validation of the email format, things like that. And then we can click finish. And this would create a page for us where we can edit the data about an employee. Okay. Now we're going to be taken back into the employees page, but now you can see there's a little edit employee button at the top. And one of the nice things about Visual Builder is while you're in design mode, you can switch the view to be live mode. You can then click on an employee, click edit employee. This would take you as though you were in a live application into the next page where you can now see the data about an employee. Okay. And now you can take this page and you can modify it further. For example, this is a form. You can say, I want my form to show as 2 columns instead of 1. So this would automatically arrange everything in 2 columns. The picture doesn't make sense to show it like that. It would make sense to show it as a picture component. One of the components we have is called an avatar component. We can bring it up here to the top, make it a little bigger. Okay, and then assign the data to it using our expression builder, go to the employee object and pick up the picture. And then we can see the picture, which then means that we can remove this field, for example. Okay. Now note that when you're in this page in live mode, you have things like the relationship between department and employees. You automatically have this drop-down list over here that you can pick from. You can update the salary. For example, if we set the salary for Dave to be 5,000 and click save, it would be reflected over here in the chart now with 5,000 and the data is here. So those are basically the 10-minute experience of developing a full application that deals with employees and departments. But what we wanted to do for the rest of today's seminar is to drill and understand what actually happened here in the application. Okay, so the first thing to understand is that what you're creating here, this UI, is actually just HTML. And in fact, you have here the code view. And if you switch to the code view, you can see the HTML. Okay, and you can modify the HTML. So for example, this is the header for your page. Right now it says employee, and you can say, for example, list of EMPs instead. Okay, and if you switch to design view, now it says list of EMPs because all of those things are related to each other. The visual view, the properties here, for example, if I switch this to be a smaller title, H2, this would be reflected in the code with an H2 component here. Okay, so everything is tied in together. The page itself is constructed from jet components. So for example, we have a table, so we're using the jet table component. Okay, again, HTML tags that are used here with a bunch of values, properties set for them. The chart, also a chart component. If we switch over to the page where we edit details of an employee, we have a form with fields in here. One of the things you can see here is you can actually see the structure here in the structure pane. Okay, so you can see we have an avatar up here, then we have a form, and inside the form, we have all those fields. Okay, and if you switch to the code, you would see the same thing. Here is our form, here is our field. Now, those are the UI components. Where do they get their data from? So if you look at each one of those input components, for example, you would see that the value is coming from something called page variable employee. And then sometimes it's the name, sometimes it's the country, sometimes it's the department. Okay, but everything in the page is coming from a variable. Okay, so in the page, beyond the components that we are seeing here, there's a section for variables. Okay, so here is our variable. We have a variable called employee. Okay, it's a variable that has fields in it. So this is an object which has multiple fields. So those are all variables that store the data about an employee and allow us to modify it. And when we modify the variable, we modify the UI, we modify the value of the variable, and then we can save it. Okay. So then the question is, okay, how did we get the data into the variable? Okay, how did we actually fetch the data for the employee? So each of our pages over here has a bunch of events that are happening here. Okay. And on this page, when we enter the page, there is an event that is happening, which is called load employee. And we can go over to look at the event. Okay. And this is how you define events in Visual Builder. You basically draw a diagram of the logic flow. It's kind of an algorithm of your operations that are happening in events in your page. So when we load the page, what we do here is we call a REST service. We call the REST service that gets us the list, get us an employee. And we also pass in a parameter. We pass in a parameter, which is the employee ID, okay? Which employee to get. And after we get this, if it was successful, we're going to assign a variable. If we go in here, we can see that we are going to take the result of calling this REST service, which would return us this set of information, and we're going to assign it to the variable at the page called employee, okay, and all the fields there. So this is how we get the data into the variable, right? And then when we finish updating everything, we are going to click the save button, right? So the save button, each component has events, okay? So the button has an event. When we click on the save button, we're going to invoke this action chain, which is a little bit more complex, okay? You can see, we can zoom in, okay, and move it around. What we're doing here is we're going to do a validation of the data, and if the data is valid, we're going to check if someone else changed our employee record while we were working on it. And if they didn't change it, we are then going to call a REST service that is going to do the update of the employee data back into the database, again, passing in the employee ID and the set of variables that have the values, okay? So this is how variables are being populated using action chains inside our application, okay? So now I'm gonna go back into the slides for one slide to explain what we've just seen and the relationship between components, okay? So we started by creating a page by picking up UI components and arranging them on the page, okay? So your pages are constructed from UI components. Those are the Oracle Jet UI components or other components that you can bring in. We're supporting the web component standard, okay? Those components are getting their values from variables that you define in the page, okay? So we saw in the page, you can have multiple variables, and then the component binds to the variable and show the data from the variable, okay? The components then have events. So we saw, for example, a button has a save event. When we click on it, it's going to invoke what we call an action chain. An action chain is a flow of multiple steps that are doing something. For example, an action chain can call a REST endpoint to get the data from it and then populate a variable, okay? The REST endpoint can be something that we expose from a business object, okay, which is what we did in this application. We created a business object, we got a bunch of REST services, and then we had REST endpoints available for them. And our wizards, our quick starts, basically created the actions that fetches from them, put it into variable and connect it to the UI. So this is all the magic that the quick start did for you in our application. Now, the nice thing now is that now that you understand this structure, you can basically do the same thing without using a wizard and do a development basically as a power developer, okay? So let's go back into our application and we're going to modify this page, right? So this page right now gets us information about which country the employee is working in. What we want to do next is we want to get more information about this country. Now, the tricky part is that we don't have an Excel spreadsheet with information about all the countries, but we do know there is a system out there somewhere on the interweb that has this information. And we also know that this system exposes this information as a REST service. So I'm going to pick up this REST service. This is the URL for this REST service. And I'm going to show you how this REST service works over here in a new tab. If I put in a code for a country. Okay, for example, if I put in US at the end and call this REST service, I'm going to get information about the United States. Hopefully this service is up and running. See? Okay, I'm counting on it to work. Yeah, there we go. So we put in a country code at the end here. We get information about the United States. Everything that you ever wanted to know about the United States is available here. Okay. Now, this REST service wasn't developed by me. It's hosted by some university somewhere over there. And frankly, I don't know how they developed it, where the data is coming from. All I know is here's a REST endpoint that I can call and get some data. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add this endpoint as a data source to my application. So if you remember on our welcome page, beyond working with business object, we can also work with service connection. And I'm going to click to create a service connection over here. Now, again, if you're working in an Oracle environment, we have some service catalogs that we can get you data from the Oracle ERP system or from the sales system or from the HCM system, the HR system. If you're working with Oracle Integration Cloud, we have a service catalog of all the integration that you exposed over there. This is part of our catalogs, which is one place where you can get data. If you have some specification for REST services, maybe you have an open API or a Swagger description of your REST services, we can also pick those up. By the way, if you're working with Oracle ADF, we can also pick up ADF-based REST services and bring them into here. But if you just have a random REST service, we can also do that. So you define by endpoint, you put the endpoint over here. This is the endpoint for our REST service. Those squiggly brackets over here are indicating that this is a parameter that we're passing in. We're going to indicate this one gets us information about a country, a single record, and then we're going to click next. This is where we can give it a name, okay, a title, okay, we can give a description if we need to. We can set all sorts of information about the server that we're accessing. For example, if this REST service was secured behind a username and password or some authentication mechanism, we have all of those available for you here to pass in information, how to log into this user, how to access it. We can also indicate whether this service support calls or not, and then we can test this REST service. Okay, so this service has a parameter. We need to pass in a parameter. For example, if I pass in CN, click send request, this is going to invoke the REST service and get me information about China. Again, today, for some reason, this service is a little slow. But there you go. This is the structure of a response. So I'm going to tell Visual Builder, this is your typical response from this REST service. Okay, keep it so you would know what is the typical structure of the data that we're getting back. And now we're ready to go back to our UI page, okay, and integrate this set of information into our page. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a section here below the buttons to show us some information about the country that the employee is working in. Okay, so we'll start again by doing the UI. So I'm going to pick up a form layout and I'm going to put it down here. Okay, and into the form, I'm going to bring in some input components. So let's put in like an input text here, and one, and we'll put another one after this one. Sorry, it's a little hard to drag and drop it into here. Yeah, and then maybe some numeric data that we need to put, maybe inside here in the middle between those two. Come on. Yeah, over here. And let's also pick up another avatar component, and we'll put this one up here at the top. All right, again, make it a little bigger. All right, so again, we're starting by just designing our user interface. Now, in order to populate this, by the way, we can set properties for each one of those. So let's say this would be the name of the country. This would be the label here. this would be what is the capital of the country. So we'll do a capital here. Okay, and this would be, sorry, this was the numeric field, right? So this would actually be the population. Okay, how many people are there? And then over here, we'll show the capital. Okay. And again, if you want to reorganize stuff in your page, you can either drag and drop it here, or you can drag and drop it here. So you can move, for example, the capital to be before the population, and just drag and drop things around. All right, so we know what we want to show. Now we need a place to store the data. So we need a variable to store the data, right? And we can create a variable and add all the fields. So again, we can take a shortcut. We can create a type of variable. Okay, so let's create a new type. We'll call this one, we'll base it on an endpoint from a REST service. So we have our country's REST service over here. Okay, and this endpoint over here. And lo and behold, Visual Builder knows the structure of the data that is returned because we gave him a sample of the data. And then we can choose which of this data we want to show. So we wanted to know things like the flag and the name and the capital. And we also wanted to know the population. Right? We can pick up, let's say, region and population over here. So all of those things are things we might want to use. We bring them into our data type. We can call this our country type. And again, remember, we have quick start that would actually do this automatically for you. I'm going to do it manually here just to show you that we are understanding what's happening behind the wizard or beyond what wizard do for us. Okay, so then now that we have a type, we can create a variable. We'll call a variable, call it my country variable. And the type is going to be this type that we created here, the country type. So now this my country variable, okay, has all of those fields in it. And then we can go back to our page designer and we can say, okay, the name is going, the data for it is going to come in from the my country, okay, and the name of the country. And the capital, the data for this one is going to come in from the my country capital, and the population is going to come in from the my country and the population over here. Oh, and this would be the flag. So the source of the image is going to be from the flag field. All right. So great. Now everything is mapped, but we don't have any data inside our variable. Okay. So we need to populate the data. We need to define when do we want to populate the data. So one option is we can take and we can add a button, okay, to our page. For example, we can put a button down here next to the other buttons. We call it country info, okay. And what we want to do is we want to have an event on this button when we click on it, okay. And we want to do something when we click on the button. What do we want to do? We want to call this REST endpoint, okay, that gets us information about countries. So let's pick up the REST endpoint that we mapped, okay. This REST endpoint needs a parameter, which is the code of the country. Now we know that we have it as part of the information that we have about an employee. We have the country over here. So we map this to that, okay. So this is how you do value assignment in Visual Builder. You just drag and drop, okay. So no issues with mistyping the name of the variable or doing stuff like that. All right, now that we call this REST service, the get alpha code, okay, we get the data back. We need to assign it into the variable. So we pick up an assigned variable, okay. We have on the right side this variable called my country variable. On the left side, we have this call to the REST service that returns us all this information. And we're just going to map one to the other. Because they have the same field names, Visual Builder would automatically know how to map each field to the source of data. And that's it. Now we can go back to our application. And this guy works in GB. If we're in live mode and we click get the country info, okay, this would go over and will get us information about Great Britain. Okay, we can get the flag, capital, population, things like that. If we were to update Dave to work in the US and click country info, we would then go over and get information about the US. Okay, so we now have an application that meshes up data from multiple places into a single location. Now, one of the nice things is that you can reuse your business logic in multiple places. For example, up until now, we needed to click the button to get information about the country. What happens if we want immediately when someone changes the value of the country to get the data about the new country? So we can go to this field, okay, and define an event on the field. And the event is value change. Okay, so whenever someone changes the value, we want to do something. Okay, what do we want to do? We want to do exactly what we did there. So we can actually reuse the same logic that we already defined. Okay, again, over here, you have a lot of things that you can do. By the way, you can do if then else, you can do loops, you can do things that run in parallel. One of the things that you can do here is you can call another action chain. Okay, so we're going to call the action chain that basically was invoked in our button. Okay, we didn't give it a nice name, but we know that it's this one. So now again, let's go back to our page designer, look at it in live view. Okay, scroll down a little bit and change this guy or this country to be NZ. Step out of the field, and this should go out and fetch us information about New Zealand. Hopefully, yeah, there you go. Okay, and we got information about New Zealand, for example. So this is our application. By the way, I just worked all the time inside our design view, but at any point of time, you can click this little run button up here at the top, and this would actually run your application immediately in the current state that it's in, and you can try it out and basically test it out as a user. Okay, so we're back at our homepage. We can click on Shelly, click edit employees and go edit details for Shelly. We can see Shelly works in the US. We got the data about the US over here. We can update Shelly to work in India, for example, and then also indicate that she's working in support, update her salary, okay, and indicate that she's a manager, okay. And again, all the data is available here. When I click save, I go back to the page here, all right, and I get the information. So this is our little application now running and working, meshing up data from multiple places. All right, there's a few more things that I wanted to show you. One of the things here is, by the way, you can see that right now we need to click on an employee and then click edit employee to go and edit it. What if we want to skip this? What if we want immediately when we click on an employee to go and edit that detail? Okay, so let's go back to our page here. And at this point of time, you should already know how to do those type of things, okay? If we go back into the design, we have our table. And we know that we want, whenever we click on a table, on a row, we want to navigate to the other page. So the table has events. The event for selecting a row is already created for us, so we can go and modify the built-in event, okay? And what we want to do is, when we click on this row, we want to navigate to another page. So we pick up the navigate, bring it over here. We pick up which page we want to go to. This page expects a parameter, which is the employee ID. The employee ID is something that we already have over here because we selected it in the record, in the table, sorry. So we're mapping it to the parameter. And now if we refresh our view here, okay, we would have our new functionality in the application where we can simply click on an employee and go and get their data without needing to do anything else. So if we click on Steve, for example, we go over and we get data about Steve. And again, you can update. Steve is from Canada, by the way, and click save. Like that. All right, so let's go back to our design time and see if there's anything that we missed. So when we were looking at a page, for example, over here, we looked at page, the designer, we looked at the code view and the visual view. We looked at actions that were defined in the page, okay? So we have a list of actions that are happening here. We looked at events that are happening in the page. For example, when I click the button or when I select the record in the table, Okay, there are also custom events that I can define. Okay, we looked at types. There's a type, for example, for an employee over here with the data about an employee. And then we have variables with the data about those employees. One thing we haven't looked at yet is JavaScript. So up until now, everything that you did in the product was visual. You dragged and drop and arranged things. Even when you define your business logic, you did things by dragging and dropping. But sometimes you might want to do things that are more complex and you need to write some code for that. And that code would be written in JavaScript. So let me show you how you would go about doing something like that. So let's actually do it on this page, on the employee editing page. And let's add another button to our page. We'll add the button here. Okay. And we want to know the annual salary. Okay. So this will be the annual salary button. Again, we're going to define an event on this button when we click on it. Okay. And what we want to do here is we want to invoke some complex calculation, and we maybe need to write it in JavaScript. So one of the things you can add to an action chain is calling a JavaScript function. Okay. So we're going to call a function, and we're going to create a function. We'll call it annual salary function. I'm going to create it. Okay. Now, if I click on go to this function, I would go into the JavaScript area and into the function that was created for me. I can see there's already a variable that is passing in. I can modify it. We'll call it, for example, the salary. Oh, sorry. Double click here. This is what I want to know. Okay. And over here, I can write a bunch of logic. For example, I can write an if statement and check, for example, something. Okay, I'm going to keep it relatively simple. I'm going to return the salary, okay, which is the variable, time 12. By the way, notice that our code editor is a smart code editor. You get things like code insight all over the place, syntax highlighting, things like that are all going to be shown here. Okay, so as you type, you can get things like code insight into your variables and things like that. But we're going to keep it simple. We're going to return a salary of 12. I'm also going to take advantage of the fact that I'm in here to add one more row. I'm going to use a console log, and I'm going to say I'm calculating now salary is, and we're going to add salary here. So I'm only doing this in order to show you how you can log messages, for example, and we're going to see this in a minute. All right, so now we have a function that calculates the salary. It accepts a parameter. So let's go back to our action. Okay, we have the function here. Okay, and we need to pass. We need to pass in a parameter into the function. Sorry, we have. Did I make a mistake somewhere in the code? Oh, this looks okay. Okay, so go back here. Might need to do a little refresh for it to show up. There you go. Yeah, sorry. All right. It should have an input parameter. Oh no, sorry, I'm on the wrong action chain. Sorry. Yeah, I was. I knew something was suspicious. We were looking at the wrong button. I need to look at the button that is annual salary and look at the action chain over here. All right, so we have the call function. Okay, it has a parameter that we need to pass in. So we're going to map this parameter, the salary. We're going to take it from the data about an employee. Take the salary, drag and drop it over here, assign it, and then we would calculate the salary. Now, once we calculate it, we need to show it somehow. So let's do a fire notification, bring in a little pop-up. It's going to be an information type of notification. It's going to be a transient one. Annual salary is, and then in the message here, we're going to pick up the result from our calling of the function. All right, so let's go back to our page. Again, we're in live view. Okay, we have Dave who's making 5,000 a month. Click the annual salary, and hey, we have a pop-up that tells us this is his annual salary. All right, so this is when Visual Builder, when we get complex, so-called, you can actually call JavaScript code, pass parameters to it, do any calculation you want. You can bring in third-party JavaScript library, integrate them in there, and have them work in there as well. So now let's go back and look at our application. Our application has flows, okay? Each flow, for example, the employee flow can have multiple pages that can be related to each other. You can navigate from one page to the other. You can have subflows. We only worked with a single flow over here from the employee start to the edit employee. At the application level, by the way, things that you can set include settings such as security, okay? So you can, for example, say whether anyone can access your application or whether you require people to log in, okay? Similarly, on business object, if you work on employees, you can set the security here to say, okay, who's allowed to do what with the employee object? For example, I can say anonymous users are only allowed to view data, they can't actually modify, okay? So there's a bunch of security layer that is also included in Visual Builder in your application. And then when you're actually ready to publish your application, you can very simply click here on the stage. Stage basically takes your application and creates a copy for testing purposes. So I'm going to populate this copy with our test data. I'll go back to our homepage for Visual Builder. Here's our stage. I click on stage. This would take me to a link. By the way, you can all try and access this link right now. Because this application is secured right now, you're going to be prompted for a username and password, and this is where you're going to get stuck. But if you had a username and password, you'll be able to go in here and basically work with our application. And all the functionality that we built is available for us here in our test application. By the way, if you need to debug this application in any way, this is a regular web application. So you can use the developer tools that you have in Chrome, for example, to look at your page, to look at your network traffic. For example, let me show you that if I change the country over here, okay, like that, you can see we are doing a REST call to our REST service to get data, and then we're getting data about Greece, for example, over here, and we're also getting the image. So network can show you your REST calls. In the console, you would see everything that Visual Builder does. We actually document here every little thing that we do here. We can output it. Of course, you can control the level of logging here. So let us show you, for example, the annual salary. When I click on this button, you can see in the log what we did. We invoked this action chain. Okay, and then inside this action chain, we called our little JavaScript function. Our JavaScript, by the way, put out a console message over here. I'm calculating now salary is 2,000. That was the parameter that we built in. And then we fired up a notification to show you the annual salary. Okay, so debugging your application is very easy, like any other web application with the tools that you have at your disposal inside your browser. Looking at the time, we're just about to end our session for today. Hopefully, this has been a useful experience. By the way, once you're done with the testing, the next stage for your application is publishing the application. Simply click here, publish. This would give you a production URL for an application that you can go and give your customers to use. There's a lot more for Visual Builder that we didn't have time to cover today, but you can learn about it in a lot of our other videos and tutorials. For example, the fact that you can directly connect to a Git repository from here and manage your development team from here. Again, if you're going into Visual Builder, one of the things you might be interested to learn more about is something called Visual Builder Studio, which gives you a complete life cycle for your application, from tracking issues to managing your code in Git repositories to automating the whole process of taking your code changes and publishing it to your clients very easily in an automated way. This is something called Visual Builder Studio, and it's the next level to learn after you learn the basics of Visual Builder, which is what we did today. Of course, there's much more to learn in a lot of places. If you want to learn more, docs.oracle.com, search for Visual Builder. Over there, you would find our official documentation. You would find a couple of tutorials that would take you step by step through an application that is very similar to what we did today. And also on this page, there's a section called the community section. And over there, you will find links to our blog at blogs.oracle.com/VBCS, where we have all the latest news published over there. All the recording of seminars like the one that you've doing today are also there. We also put all those recordings on our YouTube channel. So if you're in YouTube, you can search Oracle Visual Builder and find a bunch of videos that teaches you everything from the getting started to much more advanced capabilities and how-tos that we'll cover there. If you have any questions, we have a forum on the Cloud Customer Connect platform that Oracle has, where you can ask technical questions, and all of us PMs are out there helping customers, and other developers are helping other customers. And it's nice to see the community coming together and helping each other. We also have a LinkedIn group. If you're doing Visual Builder development, join our LinkedIn group. Again, we're posting the news item there. We're posting announcement, and we're posting job positions for people who know Visual Builder. So those are great places for you to go and hang out and learn more information. That's basically all we had time for today. I wanted to see if we have any specific questions that are unanswered in the Q&A. I can see that Laura and Brian have been very busy answering tens of questions today. Again, if you have any further questions, feel free to join our Cloud Customer Connect and ask them over there. You can also reach us on Twitter. My name is on the first slide that you saw there. You can follow me and ask me questions over there as well, although the forum is probably the more appropriate way for you to interact with us. Anyway, wanted to thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully this has been educational. You got something out of it. The next thing you need to do is just go over and develop your first Visual Builder application, or your second or 100th application. Thanks for attending today. Have a great day.